Welcome to the AI Education Conference, Redefining Education in the AI Era, specifically for Humanities and Social Sciences. My name is Sean Poncha, and I'm a student at the University of Toronto's Commerce program, and I'll be the moderator for this session. I encourage all viewers to ask questions using the Q&A button in the menu that they'll be answered at the end of this conference. So to start off, I'll be introducing our panelists. So we have Professor Jeff Schatten, who is an associate professor of business administration at Washington and Lee University, and was also once a high school teacher. His areas of expertise include negotiations, organizational behavior, and artificial intelligence. He even hosts a podcast, Demystifying Organizations. We also have Professor Antony Aumann, who is a professor of philosophy at Northern Michigan University. He has also had positions at the Ohio State University, St. Olaf College, and Fordham University. His research and teaching primarily focus on existentialism and aesthetics, but he also has interests in the effects of AI on education. His views on ChatGPT have made front page news in the New York Times in January 2023, and he has discussed the topics on numerous TV and radio shows, including NBC News Now, CNN, Fox News, NPR, and Dr. Phil. At the end of the conference, we'll also have Professor John Haberstroh, who is an assistant professor, in residence of ancient world history in the history department at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. His teaching emphasizes interaction with ancient documents, critical reflection, information literacy, and active learning. Professor John uses specifications, grading, and ungrading in his courses to inspire authentic engagement with the ancient world. We also have student panelist Ami Patel, a student at the University of Toronto, and Li Wu from Minova University, who will share their experiences using AI as students. Now we will begin with Professor Jeff Schatten with his presentation.
All right, thanks so much for having me. Let me get this thing loaded. So I'm going to step aside from my normal take, which is as a business professor, and I'm going to walk you through why I am wildly optimistic about AI in terms of education, and I'll kind of touch on higher education as well. There have been articles across publishing landscape with skepticism about AI in education. It's, as you've seen a lot of this, ChatGPT and cheating. You've seen the end of high school English, and even my own op-ed. So even my own op-ed, will artificial intelligence kill college writing? In this op-ed, I walk through some of the challenges that artificial intelligence does present for writing. And I don't mean to discount any of these at all. I'm going to take a step back. Imagine you're a billionaire, right? How would you educate your kids? Well, we actually know, because we know how they educate their kids. They hire a lot of private tutors. And there's, for obvious reasons, right? If the worst thing would be to have a classroom size of 100 kids in a class, it's pretty advantageous to have some classes that are one-on-one. And that's how many billionaires educate their kids. Back in 2010, I experienced the other end of the spectrum. I was a consultant in South Africa living in Cape Town, and I was pulled into a project in a township called Kaliche. And it's in the outskirts of Cape Town, and the average person there is living on less than $2 a day. So it's the bottom of the pyramid, it's the base, the bottom of the global pyramid. And I did a lot of consulting projects helping businesses get off the ground. And this was just one of them that happened to have been at a public school. And I remember going into the school and meeting with the principal. And the principal took me from classroom to classroom to classroom. And invariably, it was the same thing. There would be 60, 70, 80 children, 90 children running around like wild with a very well-intentioned teacher doing usually her best to keep them in line and teach them something, right? The opposite of the billionaire, right? So in the billionaire case, we have a one-on-one tutor that's going to be the best tutor out there. And at the bottom of the pyramid, of the global pyramid, we have 80 kids in a classroom, but really nothing, no kind of learning going on whatsoever. What was my recommendation to the principal? I had very little that I could offer. I mean, she was already doing pretty much everything that she could do. I added just about no value to her whatsoever. This is where I am the most excited, probably of any of the artificial intelligence stuff that I research and read about and talk about. This is where I'm most excited. It's this gap. It's this gap between Kaliche and the billionaires that I think we're going to see the most exciting advances happen. I'm going to go through just 3 examples. There's a lot of these. I'm going to go through 3 quick videos to capture how this compression happens, where we go from, I think over the next 10 years, we go from the base of the pyramid in the developing world, the base of the pyramid in the United States, where everyone is elevated up to a personalized tutor that looks nothing like any of us had as a kid. The analogy that I would give is, this is one of the great redistribution effects of technology in general. Elon Musk, his iPhone is no better than my iPhone. It doesn't matter that we have the exact same iPhone. And because technology at its core is able to redistribute across the spectrum. Let's go through a few videos. This is a program called Amira.
Hear stories and helps you with a test. All cats are in the tally, curious, and learn quickly.
Hold on. Let's review innately. Instead of sitting down with one individual student, I could have 4 students on the computer, all reading different passages at their level. She would work with them until they got it correct and then have them practice it again.
Okay, so in this program, right, you're able to have an AI that is working on an individualized basis for each student where they are. I mean, this is what I do with my 6 and 7-year-old children. Right? I'm a one-on-one father tutor for my 6 and 7-year-old children, but we don't have that for most people, right? What do we have? We have a classroom of 30 kids or 40 kids or 20 kids or 15 kids. And the teacher or the professor is kind of just hoping that each kid, even though they're all individualized and having their own individual needs, we're just kind of hoping that what we're putting out there is actually reaching them as individuals. All right, here's another one. This is a program called, this is a product called Century. And this is now going to take us from individualized instruction to how a teacher might be looking at individuals, but in context with the entire classroom, and then how that feeds to the larger pedagogical goals.
It combines. Century helps each learner to improve through question by question and end of lesson feedback. Students are clear on where they went wrong and what they need to focus on next time. Century also supports teacher-led interventions. Students' work on Century is marked automatically, and the data collected can be viewed through easy-to-use teacher dashboards. You can see which students have grasped a concept, who is struggling, and which students need to put in more effort. This makes it quick and easy to identify which learners require stretch and challenge or support in a timely and targeted way.
None of this was possible a year ago, right? I mean, this is all just in the last year that we can now give individualized instruction at scale and for a pretty cheap price, which is going to quickly approach free. This is my 7-year-old daughter talking with Annie.
About my trip I just had.
Hi there, of course. I'd love to hear all about your trip. Where did you go? What did you do?
I went to Georgia and we go to the pool and to Whitewater.
Wow, that sounds like an amazing trip.
Okay, so you're getting the picture, right? And this is not even an educational conversation, but we're going to be able to give individualized instruction in a way that has just been the dream forever. And what the exciting part is that it brings up the base of the pyramid. All right, just go through a couple other things. This is in Rwanda. Government launches new program to connect all schools to the internet by 2024. Just showing you some nuggets of where we see on the developing space where this will start reaching communities at scale. We will start seeing this in India, of course, in the upper parts of India, in the upper echelons of India, it's no problem. But in the slums of Delhi, this will be just like in Kaiwicha, where I did work in Cape Town. Bill Gates says the AI chatbots will transform education by making tutoring affordable and accessible. It's pretty much going to happen across the globe, and I imagine it's going to happen pretty quickly. What are some of the downside effects? What are some of the concerns of this? Of course, jobs, right? I mean, we have every reason to believe that this could be a problem for many teachers. It does potentially de-skill a lot of teachers, a lot of professors. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. Will I be relevant in 20 years? I'm not sure. I don't know what my role as a professor will be in 20 years. It could be, right, that the ideal classroom is actually a classroom of 3. It could be that a college classroom at a lot of universities has 3 students and 1 professor, but that professor is just an AI that knows the students much better than I do. The AI is far smarter than I am in my discipline, but in every other discipline. And the AI has been able to track the learning of the student over the past 5 years. So I don't know. I mean, we could have it where the jobs component does become a challenge. But the one thing I'm sure of is that Cape Town in 2040 looks very different than it does today, right? That these students that are being raised in families that maybe they're still living on less than $2 a day. Maybe they're living on less than $5 a day. We might still have mass poverty, but there will be a floor put under that poverty because of the education of the next generation. I'm very confident that Cape Town in 2060 really looks different than Cape Town in 2040, right? Once you have a global population that the average person at the bottom has a world-class education, it takes care of so many of the ills and concerns that we have across society. And so for that, I'm just wildly optimistic about the effects that we will have at education, even though I might not be a part of it for long. I might be replaced. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Professor. I think this is really going to be helpful for students to sort of understand. I myself was in Cape Town a couple of months ago in the township of Langa, so not too far from Kailicha, doing a consulting course, and I could really see the education disparity, from what we get in North America compared to South Africa. But as you said, I think AI can definitely bridge the gap between this education disparity, especially with these online technology platforms coming up for students to use at low cost. So thank you so much for using this analogy to sort of help us understand the scope of AI in the future. So now we'll be moving on with Professor Antony Aumann's presentation.
Thanks, Jeff. That was really fabulous and really inspiring. I appreciate all of that. I'll tell you a little bit about my own experience with AI and ChatGPT. Last December, I caught a student using ChatGPT to write an essay for my world religions class, and that made front page news at the Times, and it landed me on NBC and even Dr. Phil. But it's since become kind of a commonplace occurrence. In fact, every professor I know has caught at least one student who is trying to use AI to complete some of their assignments. So in my case, I was actually kind of lucky because my student confessed. And I don't know what I would have done if they hadn't. I mean, I had my suspicions, right? Like their essay was a little bit too perfect for student work. But that's like hardly really convincing evidence. And it's definitely not going to convince any kind of academic review board. These days, a lot of teachers are turning to AI detectors. Perhaps most famously, Edward Tian's GPT-0 to confirm their suspicions about students. I didn't have that luxury last year, but I actually don't think that it matters because I don't think that the AI detectors are very reliable. And I actually don't think that any academic review boards should convict anybody of plagiarism on their basis either. So that's my first piece of advice for any teachers in the audience. If you want to catch a student, you're going to need a confession. But I actually don't think that we should be trying to catch our students using AI in the classroom. I think that was my mistake last year. It was the early days of ChatGPT, and I got caught up, like so many people. I got caught up playing cop. I got up trying to detect and prevent my students from using this new software to get out of their assignments. I now think that that was just a big mistake. Partly for some of the reasons that Jeff has talked about, that AI is here to stay, and our students are going to be using it whether we like it or not. So we have an obligation to teach our students how to use it responsibly. So that's what I want to talk a little bit about. What is it to use AI responsibly in the context of education? Well, there's naughty uses and not so naughty uses. Let me start by telling you about a naughty use, a bad use of ChatGPT. What my student did is actually a good example. They kind of mindlessly just plugged the instructions for the assignment into ChatGPT and then took whatever it spit out and submitted it as if it were their own. I think that's a mistake for two reasons. The first reason is, if that's what you're going to do with it, you're wasting your education. I ask my students, why are you here? Why are you in school? Yeah, I know, to get a degree, so you can get a job, so you can make money, but you're here for another reason too. You're here to figure out who you are. You're here to figure out what you really believe, what you really care about, what really matters to you. And all of that is never going to happen if you let ChatGPT do all of the thinking for you. You got to learn how to think for yourself. What my student did was a mistake for a second reason. Honestly, it just wasn't a very good use of ChatGPT. If you want to get the most out of AI, I've got a slogan for you. Don't ask it for the answers. Ask it for alternatives. Tell it to give you 3 different ways of responding to this particular assignment, and then do the work of trying to figure out which of those 3 ways is the best for you. Or ask it for 4 different examples to some point that you're trying to make, and then sort through those examples for yourself to pick out what the best one is. In general, don't just accept the first thing that ChatGPT or whatever AI program you're using, don't just use the first thing that it tells you. If it doesn't make sense, you got to push back against it. You got to ask it for clarifications, for elaborations, and for alternatives. If you think about it, that's how we treat other people when we're working on a project. We ask other people for advice, but we don't just dogmatically accept whatever it is that they say. And if what they say doesn't make sense, we push back against them. We ask them for clarification, for elaboration, for examples. So here's my big piece of advice for students out there. Of course, AI chatbots aren't people, but you get a lot out of those programs if you treat them as if they were. People ask me all the time whether I use AI to write this presentation or to write my papers. And the answer is that I do. I use it a lot. I use it all the time in exactly the ways that I just described. But I actually don't think, and this is kind of maybe some of the stuff that Jeff is gesturing towards in his presentation, I actually don't think that that question is going to be important in the near future. Do we really care whether students are using calculators to complete their math problems? Not really. Do we care whether they're using spell check or Grammarly or the Hemingway app or a dozen other of those tech things that we can find to help them improve their essays? No, we don't. We think all of those are acceptable uses of technology to improve their work. We think they're natural extensions of your natural abilities. My suspicion is that within a couple of years, that's how we're going to use AI. We're not going to think anything of it as long as you don't let it do all of the work. But therein lies the rub. How do we make sure that students are doing their fair share of the work? And that's the question that has gotten teachers kind of across the world into a panic. So one popular response at this point is to go medieval. A lot of my colleagues are saying they're going to go back to paper and pencil exams in the class, or even, God forbid, oral examinations in front of the classroom, because that way students won't be able to use ChatGPT. Another popular response is to say that, no, we teachers need to change. We teachers just need to get more creative. We got to invent assignments that are ChatGPT proof. So one popular move here is to say that students have to write essays that talk about their own personal experiences, and that's something that ChatGPT won't know about. But in my experience, I don't think we have to do any of those things. Last semester, I told my students, use ChatGPT as much as you want. And I showed them good ways to use it. Guess what percentage of my students actually used it? 20%. And of that 20%, the vast majority just used it to polish their final drafts. I think those results suggest to me that students still do care about coming up with their own ideas. And they still do care about finding their own ways to express their ideas. I don't think that should be surprising to any of us. This drive, this desire to come up with our own thoughts, to figure things out for ourselves, and then share our own beliefs with other people, that drive is a deeply, deeply human drive. And I don't think that AI is ever going to be able to take it away from us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Aumann, for your time. I think just being able to understand how students are sort of using it right now and the various ways they can use it in the future. I think personally for me, it should be used as a tool of just getting background knowledge, but in the end, you shouldn't sort of use it blindly to, submit the assignment. You should sort of, reflect on what they're trying to say through the AI and sort of curate your own answers and make it sort of your own work. I think that will help you learn as well, rather than just, copy pasting information. So I think that's very important for students to sort of know right now. And I think it's great that you pointed it out through your presentation. Thank you so much for your time. Now we'll have Professor Eberstroh, who will now present.
All right, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. Greetings from sunny and hot Las Vegas. I am here today to talk to you about how I've kind of handled the ChatGPT world that most higher education professors are now living in. So I'll start things off first here by just being very transparent about where I stand. Frankly, I'm just not a fan. I'm not a fan of generative AI. As of spring 2023 semester, I had my students do stuff in class to kind of play with it and see the limitations and things like that. And my conclusion is basically that generative AI is not applicable or valuable or even useful in all learning contexts. So to the folks who see AI as like this one-size-fits-all solution to all of our human problems, I think that's a bit misguided. So I'm coming at this from the context of history courses in college. I teach ancient history, so we read a lot of ancient texts and translations. We work with material objects, things like that. Right? These aren't math equations. These aren't, I'm not coding anything in my classes, right? So it's reading and writing, right? That's and oral communication, right? Those are like kind of like the values that I have in my classes. And so as it relates to my pedagogy, right, how I teach my students, first and foremost, I trust my students, right? So I think it's important, and Professor Aumann said this too, right? Like, I am not the ChatGPT police, right? I'm not here to get anyone in trouble, and I too have some regrets about, using detection software and seeing and kind of like gotcha moments, right? Like, moving forward, I'm just never going to use those again. It leaves you with just such an icky feeling, right? But if you just trust your students and you communicate to them, the expectations, right? Everyone can kind of healthily navigate this world. So I'm also coming at this from the kind of idea that generative AI is here to stay, right? It's going to become more commonplace. Students will use it, whether or not you say they can use it or not in their classes, okay? And so all I can do as an instructor, and again, my experience in the spring semester was one of kind of powerlessness. Like, I, as an instructor, felt like this is over, higher education's over, right? Like, it's done. Like, what am I doing, right? And so what I'd like to pitch to you all today is kind of my solution to this issue here. And so I'm doubling down on communication, okay? So all instructors should always communicate their learning objectives clearly and transparently, and as well as their expectations, right? I think a lot of times I hear from other faculty that, oh, I shouldn't have to tell them this, or I shouldn't have to do this or that. with my students. But the bottom line is that, yes, you do have to tell them, you do have to communicate to them. And rather than just putting a kind of boilerplate standardized kind of policy in your course syllabus, which again, there's tons of data about how little students actually interact with course syllabi. That's not to me, that's not an effective place to put my expectations about AI or ChatGPT or whatever it may be. And so what I'm going to share with you all today, and I'll put the link here in the chat, just a second. So this is a link to a Google Doc of sample generative AI non-use pledges. So again, I can't ban AI, or I shouldn't ban AI. I also don't want students to let the AI do all the work for them. So, and again, not all assignments require the use of ChatGPT or Bing Chat or whatever. And so what this tool is for instructors is basically, it gives them some power, right? The sense that they have some control over the learning environment in a way that makes sense and conforms to the learning objectives of their class. So I have a few different examples on this page, and I should probably just share my screen here. Hold on. All right, so hopefully you can see this here. So I have 3 different ones. The first one here is a sort of non-use pledge that a student would read and discuss with the instructor of the course. And it lays out all the kind of expectations, and the student, we're throwing it back on the students, right? Because I can't ban it. So it's up to the student to be responsible, right? So they are going to pledge and sign their name, right? As this is a life skill, right? You don't just sign things without reading them, right? You need to understand what you're getting into. So for this particular class that I'm teaching, whatever it may be, right? Maybe I don't want any use of AI in the entire course. And so maybe I have students fill out this form at the beginning of the semester, and I remind them periodically through the semester, right? So student, pledge to submit only my work for assignments in this course. I understand that using generative AI software goes against the learning objectives and academic integrity expectations of this course, right? I pledge that every part of the assignments I submit in this class is the product of my own thinking and labor and executed to the best of my abilities. I pledge to seek out help from the instructor about assignment expectations and the ethical use of generative AI software in this course, right? So I'm telling students that, right, I want your thoughts. I want your learning to be on stage, right? And if there's issues, I, the instructor, am here to help you, right? And students are committing to this, right, by putting their name down, right? I acknowledge that using generative AI software to create material for assignments that I submit in this course constitutes academic misconduct according to blah, 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 right? And again, you, the instructor, can make this say whatever you want, right? You can put as much teeth in this as you like, right? You could, again, I'm not necessarily going to use any of this type of language, right? But I can imagine a world where an instructor may use this type of language to, again, just kind of curb potential misuse. All right, so this is one that I would use perhaps for an entire course. Maybe you have specific assignments that would be useful for generative AI. Okay, so in this case, you can use this pledge that students could submit with an assignment, like a cover sheet or something, that they are saying that I pledge that what you are about to read, Professor Haberstroh, is my own work, and I'm being ethical and honest in this situation, right? So it puts the professor at ease. And so again, you can kind of read this and look at it at your leisure here. So now, in this case, I have also a limited use pledge, because again, I acknowledge that there are some contexts where it might be useful. And so, maybe an instructor is just wanting students to pledge that, okay, we're going to use the AI for part of the assignment, a very specific part, but not all of it, right? And so again, this is meant to be kind of a baseline template for folks to use to shape it however it best suits their specific courses, right? It throws the ball of the ethics and the good practices back onto the students, and it it gets them to think about it, right? Like you're not just going to sign your name to anything for no reason, right? So you're going to really think about it. Now, of course, I've thought about like, okay, what are the pros and cons of all of this, right? So of course, there's the potential for inauthentic pledges, right? Maybe people just sign it and they try to sneak one by you, right? Refer back to my grounding principle, right? I trust my students no matter what they choose to pledge or not to pledge, right? So I have to be careful, and I think we should all be careful about inauthentic pledges, sure. What if students even refuse to pledge, right? Maybe we should come up with an alternative assignment then for them. Because again, I'm not going to put anyone in a situation where they feel like they have to lie to get around something, right? That's not the kind of environment I want either. And then again, of course, we have to think about, right, how do you enforce pledge violations, right? What if you suspect that they've used ChatGPT, even though you said, not to, right? These are all things that each individual instructor will have to think about, right? And maybe this, for some, is, you've completely said, I'm not going to do that, right? Because maybe you think it creates more paperwork or things to keep track of, right? And sure, I acknowledge that, sure, that this may do that. But again, you can customize this for any type of situation that you have. So I will spend the last minute here just kind of wrapping things up. And I just want to, again, remind instructors who may have felt like I did in spring 2023, where I felt so powerless and kind of wanted to throw in the towel here. You are not powerless in this situation. You can control the learning environment, right? It's your job to facilitate a learning environment that's good for everyone, right? Instructors also need to reflect continually, right, on what exactly it is that you want students to walk away from your courses with, right? Maybe it's not prompting. Like that is zero. I have zero interest in teaching my students how to do prompting, chat prompting, right? So what is it that I want them to take away? We also have to, in our classes, even though we're studying ancient history, in my class, we are connecting it to everyday life. We're connecting it to life beyond the classroom. Students' future and current professional careers, their own public life that they choose to live in and outside of the class. And lastly, and I'm just kind of reiterating what my colleagues have said here, right? And this is the importance of having conversations with students early and often, and just making sure that there's an open channel of communication about all of these issues, because I think we've embraced this a little too quickly. I think we should slow down, and I think we would all benefit a little bit from slowing down to talk about it and exploring those implications. So I'll wrap things up there. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor, for your time. I think this will really help educators understand the framework they can use in their classes to sort of ensure that AI is used to its limits. And I think this is really important, especially to sort of compare the students who didn't have access to AI to students who have access to AI right now, to sort of have that sense of uniformity in terms of grading, because, today's students can definitely take advantage of AI. And I think this will be a measure which can really reduce that from happening. So thank you for, summarizing this with us and, telling us more about, this contract and pledge you've developed. I think this will really help educators and students, in applying whatever they learn instead of just, copy pasting information from AI. So thank you so much for your time. Now I'll open the floor to questions from the audience. So we have one question specifically for Jeff. It's about, do you think bots will be able to teach soft, durable skills, especially human relationships / communication, as well as a bot? Do you think that knowledge sharing from professors will probably decline? But I personally wonder bots will do well with EQ training. That's the question.
Yeah, so I mean, we're definitely heading in that direction. You can right now, just using ChatGPT, I mean, you can go back and forth on all kinds of soft questions. What we don't have yet is like what you saw with my daughter with Annie, right? We don't have that yet, where there's meaningful soft skill instruction. So I gave the example from Amira, where the bot's already pretty good at doing reading, right? Stuff like that. We're definitely not at the stage where we can, I teach organizational behavior, which has a ton of it's all soft skill. So we don't have that dynamic that takes place in a liberal arts context where there's the back and forth that's kind of really hitting at some of the soft skills. It's heading in that direction. I'm confident that it gets there over time. So for example, my nuclear area of research is negotiations, and some of these bots are very good at getting at the soft parts of negotiations, right? They're pretty good at, when you go back and forth and delve into the ambiguity, asking for advice about a negotiation context, which is very soft. It's pretty good at problem solving. It's why prompt engineering is such a huge area at this point. For me, the big question here in terms of handing ChatGPT and AI over to students is that at Washington and Lee University, we have in our mission statement that students should think freely, critically, and humanely. And that cuts across all disciplines. And my big concern when we hand these tools over to chatbots and to AI is that if we just have them print up what ChatGPT puts out, I'm concerned that we have missed the point of them thinking critically, freely, and humanely. On the other hand, especially as a business professor, where we are very geared towards practical outcomes, I also want my students to be able to engage in the world as it is, not necessarily as we want it to be. So I design a lot of assignments that are AI focused. Like I embed it throughout my curriculum. But I think between myself, I'd say I might be on one end of the spectrum and John on the other. I'm actually very sympathetic to the concerns about it limiting thinking. So I guess it's my long-winded answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the answer. We also have another question open for the entire panel. The question is, how would you advise faculty to consider the outcomes of the activities more than the procedures with which faculty might be more familiar? What would you say to get faculty more excited to start exploring AI tools within their courses? Do you have any advice to transform fear into intellectual curiosity for both the students and the educators?
I have some things to say about that, and it ties into some of the things that Jeff talked about in his presentation. I think that one of the ways forward is to talk about equity. One of the things that faculty are really interested in these days is trying to make sure that that students who have disabilities have the same chance at education as everybody else. And one of the things that you notice about students who have disabilities, maybe they have dyslexia, or students for whom English is not their first language, often those students have really terrific ideas, but it's just not coming out in the actual work that they produce. And what I've noticed is that ChatGPT and other kinds of generative AI have the ability to bridge that divide for those kind of students. Has the ability to take those ideas that they have, but just have a hard time expressing really clearly, to express it and share the knowledge that they possess. And so I guess since so many faculty are so interested in diversity and equity and inclusion, start thinking about that and leveraging that commitment as a way to start getting more excited about what AI can do in your classroom.
Thank you so much for your answer. We also have another question from Professor Haber-Stroh. It's about how the use of AI will not be used in courses. How will students be able to use AI later on in the workplace?
So I think this goes back to some of the other discussions that I've heard before where we're concerned about equity, right? How will students be able to use AI if they can't read and write? Right, so we are assuming that all college students are coming in learning how to do that at an advanced level. And here, go wild on the ChatGPT and prompt it and do all these things, right? But if they can't even do that if they can't even read and write effectively at the college level, right? Like we can't just expect them to be masters of this. And frankly, in the course outcomes of my classes, in the course outcomes of the history department at UNLV, in the university learning outcomes of the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, chat prompting is not a learning outcome, it is not like being able to use AI is not a learning objective, not yet. And if it ever does come to that, I'm not sure I'd want to be here anymore. But, you know, so I think a lot of these problems that we have about student engagement, about diversifying our curriculum, all of these things, these can all be answered without the use of AI. It's just a matter of changing our pedagogy to be one that's more student-centered and active and focuses on active learning. And so again, there's tons of peer-reviewed best practices about how to up our pedagogy without AI, right? I think for me, it remains to be seen whether or not AI will be better or more, certainly being pitched as more efficient, right? And who's saying that? Corporate interests are saying that, right? Up your efficiency. And you know, this stuff isn't going to be free for much longer. And so now students will have to start paying to use these programs. They already do for subscriptions to like Grammarly and things like that, right? You have to pay. What does that do to equity, right? So I don't know, fall back on the basics: reading, writing, critical thinking, active learning. That's where I kind of stand on that.
I have a bit of a response to that, if that's because I think, Professor Abishai, your argument sort of lies on the fact that using AI in the classroom is harmful to the development of reading and writing skills. And you're saying not all students have these very fundamental skills that we should all develop. And if we then use AI in our assignments, in our learning, it's detrimental to these skills. And then now we have a generation of kids who don't know how to read and write properly at this high level. And I think to a degree that's very true, because when used in the wrong ways, it can completely suppress the learning, because then you just have ChatGPT do it, and you're not doing what you're there to learn. You're completely skipping the learning process. But at the same time, I think there's also many cases where the AI can be supplemental. And it can help, not just help you learn prompting, but can also help you learn writing, and it can help you learn reading. And so like one idea is this desirable difficulty. And so if you have a student who has a pretty low level of learning, maybe they're international, English is not their native language. It's also thinking about equity. And you give them this really difficult text, which the rest of the class is okay with, but this particular student is struggling with. Then if you put AI into the picture, it can help simplify the text, not give them the whole answer, but help them part of the way that they're at that right desirable difficulty. And in this way, the AI is improving the reading experience. So, and then what you're saying with equity and, you know, corporate interests, I think that is very valid, but I don't fully buy the argument that in every single case, AI is detrimental to our reading.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and again, I don't think AI should be banned in every learning context, right? I think tutoring, that's probably a great way to go with it, right? I think if a student needs a little extra push or some clarification at 2 a.m. in the morning when your professor's not available, sure, that makes total sense, right? But again, professors, people who work at the writing center, the tutoring labs, right? These are paid staff who are there just like waiting for students to come, but they don't come, right? So we're kind of like pitching a AI bot instead of a human, right? And I think as a humanities instructor, that's kind of concerning to me. And again, to Professor Schatten's point, right? Like, what's the point of having professors then at that point, right? That's like the kind of slippery so logical conclusion, right? But as someone who just started my career, that's a little concerning, right? Someone who spent 10 years earning a PhD, that would be a bummer, right? To say the least. So, so I think again, if it's a scaffold for learning, awesome, right? If it can enhance learning, maybe there's students who are like extra advanced in your classes who are kind of bored by the rest of the class. Maybe they can use this to take it to the next level, right, on their own. That's awesome. Let's do that. But it is not a one size fits all solution for everybody. Thanks for your question.
Yeah, thanks to both of you for sort of answering this question with both your experiences. I also have another question for Professor Albom Show. It's about the alternative assignment for those who don't sign the pledge. So Is there a reason you wouldn't give that assignment to begin with, or is there a reason why writing in a history class is essential? Because perhaps some type of project would be better and not cause these problems.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't typically assign traditional research papers in my classes, even before generative AI. I think it's, again, I'm trying to do things that interest students, right? So we do annotated timeline assignments. We do things like I had students do 3D printing last semester, and they made this Greek statue in a 3D print, and they wrote up a little essay about that, right? So I kind of do things that aren't always so writing intensive, but I had students do a timeline last semester where it read a little funny, and it was clear that it was produced by ChatGPT, even though it wasn't a traditional essay, right? So, again, what type of alternative assignments would I do, right? It might be something handwritten. It might be something more like an oral presentation, something like that, right? Where it's an alternative, I'm flexible, we can do things like that, right? So it's up to the instructor, I think, to devise what would work best for them. And again, you're not designing 100 different alternative assignments, right? You have a backup to the one that you come up with.
Yeah, thank you so much for your response. We also have a question for Professor Schatten. It's about a professor who's currently teaching religion and ecology, and her students, or his or her students, are deeply concerned about the ecological footprint of LLMs. While I share your excitement about the potential of AI to create a more level playing field, the reality is that climate change is affecting the global south more than the global north, and LLMs have the potential to exacerbate this. What conversations are you encouraging learners to help them critically think through these types of issues?
Yeah, so the climate change issue with large language models, I view this similar to really any other technology that we have, whether that's cars, gas-powered cars, or whether that's airplanes or anything, or cryptocurrency. We have to have a conversation, which doesn't happen, but an international dialogue between the G7 about what are the trade-offs and the costs and benefits of cars. I think it fits into the broader context of figuring out what are the potential positive outcomes that come from this. I happen to be in the camp, and I think the evidence is already there that the benefits that AI is producing is just so astronomical at this point that it's going to be at the top of the top of the curve. So, for example, there's a form of, now I'm leaving the conversation about education, but there's a form of colon cancer that's already been cured because of the technology underpinning AI, right? I mean, we could easily, and I think most people that are in this, that are optimistic in this area, think that the solution to green energy is probably sitting there somewhere in the next 5 or 10 years in an AI model. And aging issues, issues of genomic problems. I have 2 brothers who are Fragile X. There's some incredible stuff happening with AI research in Fragile X and Down syndrome. So it's a dialogue that's similar to anything else. The upside for AI is so astronomical. I have a hard time thinking that it's going to be beneath some of the other, I'd say cryptocurrency, for example, right? We have one that can cure cancer and cure a lot of the ills of society, and another that does a very effective job of moving money around. I mean, and I'm not, that's going to be the kind of dialogue that we have to have. I happen to be wildly optimistic about AI in general, so I imagine it's just going to end up at the top of the heap of where benefits can come. But still an important conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for your response. I'm sure I'll have the person asking this question. So my final question is mainly to the student panelists. Based on what we've discussed today, what do you think would be the appropriate sort of teaching methodology and, way of assessing you in, the various courses in humanities and social sciences? What framework would you like, sort of have as a student, sort of studying in humanities and social sciences?
I guess I'll go first. I think like there's been a lot of interesting perspectives and varying perspectives provided by the faculty, especially in like the served panel. And as a student, I think like for me, it's important to accept that one, AI is here, and I feel like it's here to stay and it's not going anywhere. So I'd like to see it become integrated into my courses more often, because if it's not, then I'm not really learning how to interact with this technology that everybody else is already working with, already sort of becoming familiarized with, and they know how to leverage it in their for their work and in their like even outside of school, right? And if I were to go into the workplace, I wouldn't know how to use this technology, and I feel like that would put me at a disadvantage compared to like other people that have already learned how to use it. So I think it's in terms of integrating it into courses, I feel like if as a student, I would be more strategic about the kinds of courses I take, the kinds of assessments that professors have in their courses. Like one of my biggest fears with AI was just like, I'm scared that my professors are going to go back to like multiple choice testing, but what does that really teach me, right? Not much. I already know how to make flashcards. I know how to memorize content. I'm a psychology major, but like compare that to a class where teachers have more applied projects. We have problem-based learning. I did my undergraduate at McMaster, where they really emphasize this kind of like community engaged learning, problem-based learning. And I'm leaving these courses with real world skills, right? So I'd really like to see like my professors, instead of going backwards and back to more traditional methods of teaching and assessment, try to embrace AI, not be afraid of it. Students are just as afraid of AI as educators are, because we're also scared for the future, right? So we need to know how to interact with this technology. And yeah, I'd really like for my professors to be like, hey, we can tackle this, learn about this, co-design our courses, include student perspectives, and move forward from there.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah, I think we are running short on time, so I've been asked to sort of conclude the session. So I'd like to thank all the panelists and speakers for their time. I'm sure that these presentations will surely help both students and educators to navigate their way through AI, specifically in humanities and social science. AI is still relatively new, and having a conference like this will surely help raise awareness of both the pros and cons of AI. So I'd just like to mention the fact that these sessions are very short and there are still many questions we still have. So please do join the brainstorming and networking session at 2 p.m. CDT. Also feel free to reach out to the speakers after their conference to their contact details. The conference report and the recordings of all sessions will be sent out to summarize the takeaways from these sessions. The questions people have asked in the Q&A will also be recorded, and we'll also try and follow up with as many of them as possible. Now, please do join our brainstorming and networking session at 2 p.m. CDT. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.